Pause for a moment. Look at the card in your wallet, in your hand, or maybe just in your memory. That small piece of plastic, it seems so ordinary, so familiar. It swipes, it taps, it disappears into machines, into apps, into our pockets, and into our lives. Most of the time, we don't even look at it anymore. It just exists. We use it. We carry it. We sometimes fear it. But what if I told you it's not just plastic? What if that card is actually a reflection, a small, silent mirror that shows you something about how you move through the world? This might seem strange to say, but every time you take out that card, you're not just making a purchase. You're making a statement. A statement about how you value yourself, how you make decisions, what you believe you deserve, and even what you're willing to risk. That little rectangle holds much more than numbers or limits or expiration dates. It holds stories, choices, emotions, and most of all, patterns. You see, for many people, the credit card is a source of anxiety. It represents debt, danger, a slippery slope. It whispers things like, you shouldn't have bought that, or how are you going to pay for this later? It carries the weight of past mistakes or unconscious habits. And the more we fear it, the less power we feel. But the card itself isn't to blame. It's neutral. It's a tool, and like all tools, its impact depends on the hand that holds it. When you look at how most people were taught to think about credit, it's usually framed in extremes. On one side, there's caution, the belief that credit is bad, that it should be avoided, that cash is king. On the other side, there's indulgence, the ease of just swiping now and dealing with consequences later. But neither approach is grounded in real understanding. Neither one teaches us how to cultivate an empowered relationship with credit, one that is thoughtful, intentional, and in harmony with the life we want to live. The wealthy, those who live with clarity and intention, have learned to see the card differently. They don't project fear onto it. They don't give it more power than it has. They see it as a tool for flow, for structure, for building. They don't fear credit because they've taken the time to understand it. They know how interest works, yes, but they also know how attention works. They've trained themselves to pay attention to what they spend, when they spend, and most importantly, why they spend. And maybe that's the deeper lesson here. Maybe this isn't really about credit cards at all. Maybe it's about learning to bring awareness to something most people treat with avoidance. We avoid checking our balances. We avoid looking at statements. We avoid facing the truth of how much we spend and on what. And in that avoidance, we lose our power. Avoidance always creates imbalance. It's like driving a car with the lights off and hoping for the best. You might get lucky, but you'll never feel safe. You'll never feel free. Now, the wealthy, those with financial peace, they've turned the lights on. They know that to drive safely, to drive well, you have to see clearly. And clarity starts with presence, with being awake to your choices. When they use a credit card, they're not just buying something. They're reinforcing a system, a rhythm, a habit of discernment. They've built rituals around reviewing their spending. They use their cards to track, to learn, to refine, not reactively, but proactively. There's a profound lesson in that, because when you stop seeing the card as the enemy and start seeing it as a reflection, something softens. You begin to realize this isn't about rules or restrictions. It's about relationship, and like any relationship, it needs trust, honesty, and care. You wouldn't ignore your partner and expect intimacy to grow. You wouldn't hide from your best friend and expect connection. And yet, we often hide from our financial lives, from our credit cards, our statements, our patterns, and hope everything will somehow just work out. But healing begins when we turn toward what we fear, when we sit down, open the statements, and look not just at the numbers, but at the story they tell, not with shame, not with blame, but with curiosity, with kindness. What was I feeling when I made that purchase? Was I rushing, escaping, rewarding myself, or was I clear, grounded, at peace? These are not small questions. They are doorways into deeper self, knowledge. into emotional awareness, into financial integrity. Because how you spend money is not just a logistical act, it's a spiritual one. It reveals your values, your wounds, your hopes. And once you start asking those questions, you're no longer just using a card. You're building something. You're becoming someone who lives with choice, with clarity, with calm. That's the beginning of real wealth. Now, it's easy to hear all this and think, well, of course the rich can be calm about credit cards, they have money. I'm just trying to get by. And that's a fair point. But I'm not talking about being rich in dollars. I'm talking about being rich in awareness, rich in agency, rich in self-respect. That richness isn't something you're born into, it's something you build. Slowly, quietly, one choice at a time. You don't need thousands of dollars in savings to begin. You don't need a perfect credit score. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need a willingness to look at that card not with fear, not with fantasy, but with fresh eyes. You need the courage to ask, what is this card trying to teach me about myself? And then to listen, because the card in your hand, it doesn't judge, it doesn't punish, it just reflects. And in that reflection, you might see not just your past spending, but your future potential. You might begin to see the kind of person who tracks spending not from fear, but from integrity, who chooses purchases not to numb, but to nourish, who builds credit not to impress, but to expand. That person is already in you. Not in the future, now. All they need is your permission to emerge. And maybe, just maybe, the next time you take that card out of your wallet, you'll feel a little more rooted, a little more awake, a little more like the kind of person who uses every purchase not to escape from life, but to step more deeply into it. That is the beginning, not of a financial strategy, but of a new way of being. One where peace and power meet. One where you don't fear the card because you no longer fear yourself, and that quietly, gently changes everything. When we think about wealth, our minds often go first to numbers, income, net worth, investment portfolios. But true wealth, the kind that sustains and liberates, is built not just on earnings, but on behavior. And behavior is shaped by systems, small, deliberate patterns that create stability and clarity over time. This is where credit cards come into the story, not as villains or saviors, but as instruments. And the way the wealthy, especially those who approach money with grace and thoughtfulness, use these instruments can teach us something quietly powerful. They don't swipe and forget. They don't accumulate balances as if they're playing a dangerous game of catch me if you can. And they certainly don't chase shiny perks just to feel important. Their relationship with credit is not casual. It's conscious, practiced, intentional. The card, to them, is part of a wider design. It fits within a framework, a strategy, one that reflects discipline, but also deep clarity. And that clarity isn't always taught in school. It's not found in most financial advice blogs or marketing emails. It's something developed over time through insight, awareness, and a willingness to take responsibility. What's striking is that this responsibility isn't cold or rigid. It's not about control for its own sake. It's not about hoarding points or hacking systems. It's about alignment, ensuring that every financial action supports a broader intention. For instance, the wealthy understand that credit cards aren't just payment tools, they are tracking tools. Every purchase leaves a trail not of guilt, but of data, and data, when approached with curiosity rather than fear, becomes clarity. They use that clarity, not once a year, not in a moment of panic, but regularly. They know where their money is going. They know what categories dominate their spending, what months tend to bring more outflow, and what habits cost more than they're worth. That's not because they're obsessed. It's because they're awake. You may notice that people with real financial clarity rarely talk about budgets in the traditional sense. They don't box themselves into tight, joyless rules. Instead, They set principles, values that guide their spending. They decide in advance what matters to them, and then they use their credit cards to support those values. They automate where possible. Their bills are paid in full not because they're wealthy, but because they've structured their cash flow with discipline. They don't let interest creep in and silently erode their peace. They've created a rhythm. Money flows in, money flows out, but always with intention. One of the biggest differences is how the wealthy manage their emotions around spending. They don't spend to escape stress. They don't buy things to feel better. When emotions rise, anxiety, boredom, insecurity, they know that no card can soothe the ache of disconnection. That wisdom is essential. Because so much of financial dysfunction comes from emotion, unspoken, unseen, unmet emotion. We buy because we're tired, because we're overwhelmed, because someone on social media made us feel behind. But the rich, the truly wise rich, spend differently. They spend to express something, not to fill something. Their purchases affirm their path, rather than distract from their pain. This is not to say that wealthy people never make mistakes, or that they never spend impulsively. But they tend to reflect afterward. They learn quickly. They adjust. They don't bury the day. They mine it. They use it to refine their systems and deepen their awareness. One practice you'll often find among these people is regular review. Weekly or monthly, they look over their credit card activity, not with fear, but with attention. They ask questions like, what surprised me this month? Did I spend out of alignment with my values? What patterns are emerging in my financial behavior? This kind of reflection transforms the credit card from a source of dread into a source of insight. It becomes a journal, a tracker, a teacher. It shows them over and over whether they are living on purpose or by default. They also understand the technical aspects of credit cards. They know which cards offer the most meaningful rewards, not based on trends, but based on their own lives. If they travel often, they use travel cards that align with their habits. If they have a business, they use cards that maximize business expenses and keep their categories clean. It's not about chasing the most glamorous reward, it's about choosing tools that work with their actual life. They avoid fees not because they're stingy, but because they value efficiency. They know that fees are often the result of inattention, not necessity. So they set reminders, use automation, and create space in their lives to stay on top of what matters. They also separate their spending in a way that supports mental clarity. Personal and business expenses are tracked on separate cards. Recurring subscriptions go on one, daily spending on another. This segmentation isn't just for bookkeeping, it's for peace of mind. It reduces cognitive load. It creates order. But perhaps the most profound thing the wealthy do differently is how they think about credit itself. They see credit not as an emergency fund or a fallback. They see it as a form of leverage, a way to create space, opportunity, and flow. They might use a 0% APRA promotion not to overspend, but to move strategically. They might finance a large purchase not because they have to, but because it allows their capital to work elsewhere in a more fruitful way. But even then, the decision is measured. Every use of credit is weighed against long-term goals. And again, this comes back to something simple, almost sacred: alignment. When credit is used with alignment, it amplifies what you care about. It helps you build systems that serve your growth, not systems that drain your energy. It brings clarity instead of confusion, order instead of chaos. That kind of clarity isn't flashy. It won't be sold to you in a commercial, but it's the kind of clarity that builds lives of peace, flexibility, and trust. So if you find yourself wondering, how can I begin to think like the wealthy in this area? The answer is not to chase more income or better cards. The answer is to start asking better questions, to begin seeing your credit card as part of a system, one that can reflect who you are and who you're becoming. To make one small shift at a time, use a card that reflects your actual life, not your aspirational one. Set an automatic payment, even if it's small. Review your transactions each week with curiosity, not shame. Ask yourself before you swipe, does this support the life I'm building? These aren't dramatic changes. But over time, they rewire your relationship with credit and with money itself. And slowly, without fanfare, your card becomes not a source of stress, but a trusted tool, a part of your system, a symbol of your presence. You start to live the way the rich do not because you have what they have, but because you know what they know. That peace is built from within, and every financial choice is a step toward it or away from it. And you begin to step toward it, one intentional decision at a time.